بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. حلقتنا في هذه الناحية عن مصادر المعلومات التاريخية Sources of Historic Information. Introduction. When a researcher studies a historical topic, he must investigate and scrutinize the sources of information. So, what information is reliable? Reliable information must come from reliable sources. A credible source will provide a comprehensive, justified theory and argument based on solid evidence. The most reliable sources of information are: first, primary sources, where taking information directly from the source or from documents or original materials that provide direct evidence of an event, such as diaries, manuscripts written by the original source himself, or inscriptions and manuscripts written by someone who had a close relationship with the source that enabled him to know his deeds and his purposes. And actions and sayings that were passed down from generation to generation repeatedly and sequentially. Those are primary sources for any kind of information. The other is secondary sources. Include what? Government papers, manuscripts, inscriptions, and writings made by contemporaries of the original source without having direct connection to the source. These are secondary. Or narratives and sayings whose news were transmitted by word of mouth from one individual to another individual or more are called oral historical. They are secondary. With this kind of history information, one should question: is oral history reliable as a source of information? Well, since oral narratives rely on the memory of individuals, they are less reliable than sources' written documents. Oral transmission can be misused to justify positions or claims, often leading to distortions and slander. Another notable problem is the problem of chronology. While written sources may be accurate in dates, oral transitions do not provide absolute dates. They are word of mouth. One of the criticisms of oral history approaches is the potential for biases based on conflicting beliefs. Now, let us look at the sources of information in Islamic heritage. The first source is the wise revelation, including the verses of prophecy and the verses of the message. All Muslims, regardless of their sects, are unanimously agreeing that this wise revelation is from God, revealed to the messenger through our master Gabriel in audio form in a clear Arabic language. And God promised to preserve it until the day of judgment. And God was true to his promise. Now, more than 1,400 years ago, it is still being recited by Muslims in the same form in which it was revealed, despite the differences in languages among the Muslims. The second source of Islamic heritage is the practical Sunnah of the Prophet, which God has commanded us to practice, as the Messenger, peace be upon him, practiced it. For example, God imposed prayer in his wise revelation and explained its general features and requirements. Then the messenger practiced it, started praying, and the first Muslims prayed with him and continued to practice it in the same way after his death. Generation after generation, Muslims around the world still practice it the same way. The third source is recurring prophetic hadiths, which is what the narrators agreed on its wording and meaning. The significance may be definite if it carries only one meaning, and the significance may be speculative if it carries more than one meaning. Scholars have differed as to how many of such recurring hadiths were there. Estimates range from 80 to 320 sayings. The fourth source are the manuscripts written by the trusted companions who accompanied the messenger, and those transcripts have reached to the generations without change. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Nothing was found of those such transcripts. The fifth source is oral narration. Researchers, jurists, and schools of thought differed regarding the degree of reliance on them, and they said, we take into account the hadiths that do not contradict what is stated in the wise revelation, like hadiths on values, morals, good dealings between people, and brotherhood among Muslims. Those are fine. Even we are not sure 100% they reached us as they were said, but still no harm in learning from them. They disagreed as to whether legislative provisions should be taken from hadith or not, considering that all the provisions were contained in decisive verses in the Quran and were explained and detailed within the Quran itself. There is a fear that it may be inaccurate due to reliance on memory, and that it may be complied for malicious purposes, political and religious. Besides, differences were found in the text of some narrations reported through several methods of transmission. Like you say, hadith an fulan, a certain text. Then you find the same text with some changes in another narration, sometimes contradicting each other. We notice the large number of hadiths that were collected and were rejected and not included in the two Sahih books are too many. For example, Al-Bukhari collected 600,000 hadiths. Only 7,275 hadith was written in his original book. Unfortunately, his original book was lost, as was the original copy of Muslim. What is in our hands is neither the actual original Sahih al-Bukhari nor Sahih Muslim, but rather what their students wrote more than 100 years after their death, and in recognition of their thanks, they put the names of Bukhari and Muslim on those books. Conclusion: the only proven source of absolute authenticity is the Holy Quran.